On September 25, 2025, the United Nations headquarters in New York prepared for its 80th General Assembly. The rhythm of diplomacy followed its usual course. Leaders from every corner of the globe filled the stage with careful words, balancing promises with politeness. But beneath the polished veneer of protocol, a sense of unease traveled through the marble corridors. There was one speech on the agenda that no one wanted to admit was different. Whispers suggested it would not just be another address, but a reckoning. That moment belonged to Ibrahim Traoré, the young president of Burkina Faso. Rumor said he would not even speak his own words. He was expected to read a 12-page confession, drafted by powerful capitals in Paris, Washington, and Tel Aviv, an act meant to humiliate him, strip him of pride, and remind Africa of its place. Yet speculation lingered. Would he obey? Or would he turn the script upside down before the watching world? Diplomats fidgeted in their seats as his time drew near. For some, it was only suspense. For Africans watching across the globe, it was a test of dignity. When Traoré walked to the podium, silence swallowed the chamber. Journalists leaned forward, cameras tightened their focus, and interpreters steadied their microphones. He began to speak. But instead of surrendering to the imposed confession, he declared a trial. Not of himself, but of history. His first charge, the crime of slavery. His voice, steady but sharp, carried across the chamber. He described the millions of Africans who had been ripped from their homes, shackled into ships, and forced across oceans. The empires of cotton, sugar, and coffee were built on our blood, he said. It was not rhetoric, it was indictment. Delegates shifted uneasily, aware that polite applause could not wash away centuries of wounds. The second charge followed: financial slavery through the CFA franc. Since 1960, 14 African nations had been required to store half their reserves in the French treasury. Over $500 billion had been siphoned in this way. Is this freedom, or just another kind of chain? He asked, letting the words linger in the heavy silence. He did not soften his tone for diplomacy. His speech had become an act of defiance. The third charge, the Rwandan genocide. In 1994, nearly 1 million lives were lost in just 100 days. He accused France not of silence but of complicity, reminding the chamber that soldiers had shielded perpetrators even as victims pleaded for help. The room grew tenser. The fourth crime, the stranglehold of debt. He laid bare how IMF structural adjustment programs gutted health and education across Africa. In Zambia, hospitals crumbled under budget cuts. Children died not of incurable illness, but of medicine made unaffordable. His voice thundered as he declared debt a weapon, not an aid. The fifth crime was aimed at agriculture. Ghana's cocoa farmers, once pillars of the nation's pride, were broken by forced liberalization. Corporations like Nestle grew rich, while African growers went bankrupt. When our farmers fall, their corporations rise, Traoré warned. The chamber no longer resembled a hall of diplomacy, but a courtroom where centuries of exploitation were finally being read aloud. Then came the sixth crime, assassinations. He named Patrice Lumumba of Congo, Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso, leaders silenced for daring to speak of dignity. When our leaders spoke of freedom, they were buried. Yet their voices rise again through us. His declaration carried Sankara's memory into the very room that had once ignored him. The seventh Cold War interference. The U.S., he charged, armed dictators like Mobutu and Zaire, feeding instability for decades. The eighth, Nigeria's oil plunder, where companies poisoned rivers and soils, while entire communities lived and died in poverty. The ninth, foreign military bases. He denounced the 29 U.S. installations across Africa and France's lingering hold in Djibouti. They say it is for stability. But every base is another chain on our sovereignty. The 10th and final crime, hypocrisy over human rights. He accused Western powers of condemning enemies while excusing allies' abuses. For them, human rights are not principles, but weapons. Traoré did not spare names. He pointed directly at leaders. Emmanuel Macron, he declared, was the heir to an empire of colonizers. The French delegation stiffened, some avoiding his gaze. He turned to Washington, Donald Trump, you turned trade and oil into bargaining chips bought with blood. And he addressed the International Monetary Fund directly. You wear the mask of development, but you are wardens of a financial prison. The courtroom atmosphere deepened, only the gavel was missing. Most UN speeches dance around truth in a careful waltz. But this was not a dance. It was confrontation. We ask for no pity, he declared. We demand justice. His words became a rallying cry, invoking Sankara's flame and calling for an Africa that would no longer bend to debt, exploitation, or military occupation. He spoke of a union of black gold, not the oil buried in soil, but the power and dignity of African people themselves. As he spoke, delegates from across the global South sat taller. Western representatives scribbled notes, too cautious to react. The chamber was not moved to applause, but to silence the silence of recognition. As the days passed, the question remained, what would the world do with his words? Would they fade into the archives of forgotten speeches, or would they ignite movements? For millions, they had already done the latter. They had turned despair into defiance, and silence into a rallying cry. His closing declaration still echoes, we did not ask permission to be free. We stood, we resisted, and we will endure. In those words lie not only Burkina Faso's defiance, but Africa's timeless demand that dignity is not negotiable, and justice is not optional. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss any of our new videos.